How's it going? Jonesy from Praxis Probiotics, here again as a part of the Thrive Together interview series. And today I'm joined by a very special guest, my dear friends Karl and Brendan. We've got Karl Smith, we've got Brendan McDowell in the place. I've known these boys for a good handful, if not a couple of handfuls of years. We've crossed paths in various different ways, right? And one thing that you've both got in common is this appreciation and understanding for the ways in which the natural world, so plants, nature, ecology, the natural environment, can be used or engaged with in ways that can help benefit people's well-being, help improve communities, and that kind of thing. So what I'd like to do is want to explore these things in a little bit more detail. So if it's all right, Brendan, I want to come to you first, my friend. So you are a forest school leader.
Yep.
And you're a community artist, and you're passionate about the ways in which parks, allotments, green spaces, etc. can be used to improve the community. Just to warm us up and start us off, could you tell us a little bit more about that and about what you do?
So I, for a couple of years now, have been working as a sort of community artist and gardener, mostly in Normanton kind of area. I did a street piano there, which we decorated with some school kids, and I also work on a park in the community garden there. So yeah, that's kind of one of the strings, and that's really good because it's all about bringing community together to sort of establish themselves in a place, and have a bit more ownership. And lots of different people can come along and kind of get to know each other, get to know who and what is around them. And then with Forest School, I have sort of set up a company where I'm doing Forest School in the city, and that's all about teaching young people about nature and kind of inspiring in them a love for nature and giving them a way to develop their own relationship with it.
Respect. Okay, so we're going to come back to this very shortly. Cool. So Karl, my friend.
Yeah.
So horticulturalist.
Yeah.
Herbalist.
Yeah.
Psychotropic.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Well, basically I'm very much involved with the way plants work on a medicinal level, how they can heal your body and your mind. Mainly I specialise in the psychotropic plants. That's everything from your caffeine containing plants to plants like your chocolate, which contains substances like theobromine, how these affect your body, and also the more sort of out there psychotropic plants such as your ayahuasca mixtures used by the traditional shamans, and just as a way of healing and as spiritual development. I've sort of been interested in this for about 15 years and going on to do talks, giving people the correct information about these plants, looking at it from an unbiased perspective. Mm-hmm. Also going to be helping fighting against addiction by using a more holistic approach to things, and to look at problems not just directly, but to dig out at the root of the problems. For instance, with mental health, it could be your diet, could be a number of different things, and to sort of start looking at not just the symptoms, but what causes them symptoms in the first place, and how plants could be used to sort of improve your life.
Wicked. All right, respect. So one thing that I'm really interested about, to learn a little bit more about, and for people that are watching as well, how did these passions come about? Okay, so if we carry on with you, Karl, my friend, I'm really interested in the journey that you might have been on. Okay, so from when you first started to develop an interest, and the time that's passed, and obviously some of the things that you've learned, and the way in which this passion has been cultivated, and the way that it's developed, and how you personally feel when you think about the relevance of this, because you clearly think it's an important thing, it's a very, very relevant and important thing to you.
Yes.
And for anybody that's not acquainted with this world,
Yeah.
It'll be a really interesting insight for people to kind of like learn a little bit more about your journey, and again, you know, some of the most important aspects of this. So
Yeah.
are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Cool.
I would say from the beginning, what sparked my interest is going out doing foraging with my dad and my mum from a young age. I was fortunate enough to live in quite a rural area when I was younger, so there was an abundance of fruit and nuts and different fungi to go out and explore. So from an early age, I suppose it's been ingrained in my upbringing basically, and I kind of, after moving up to Derby, got a bit disconnected with the whole natural world, what's coming through school, and sort of found myself in a bit of a rut sort of thing, and found my way back out of that rut was to go out, enjoy the things that sort of ingrained in me from a young boy basically, and it helped on a therapeutic sort of level and got me out of this rut, got me intrigued in learning about the natural environment around me, and it's been a big healing process for myself. And I can see living in a city with not too much awareness about all the natural world and that, because we live in quite a dominated by high streets and stuff. It's not you know, you're not going to learn about your beach, what your beech nuts were used for, and what your pine bark is used for instance. It's we live in a world completely disconnected from that. So and
Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more in a bit about psychotropics, because it's fascinating, really cutting edge field when we think about it in terms of the medicinal uses, how they can be used for people that want to develop themselves personally and spiritually. And I'm really interested to hear any of your thoughts and opinions about that. You mentioned then like foraging. One thing that I'm really grateful for was back in the day, it's something that we got in common. I can't remember how many years ago, it might have been about 4 years ago, it might be about 3 years ago. Like you boys sparked off through City Zen that I was organising at the time, and you kindly offered to do like a foraging kind of like skill share. And it's interesting, the reason why I bring this up, because you're talking about foraging, it's something that you both have in common in terms of your interests, because you're both interested in foraging and the relevance of that, and talking about living in kind of like an urban environment. So living in a concrete jungle, there's understandably, you know, I say this for empathy and solidarity, there's a huge amount of people that are disconnected from not just the kind of natural world, but this idea of what's available and what's accessible. You know what I mean? There's like there's food poverty, there's hunger, there's things like that. We live in a time of austerity where, you know, you've got like the rise of food banks, you've got people that are homeless that are struggling to find decent food and stuff like that. And you guys ran this in the city, so when you ran this foraging workshop, it wasn't something, and it would have, you know, it's absolutely great when you do go somewhere where there might be a great abundance or something, but what I thought was really interesting about this is really accessible to people, because it was it was smack bang in the middle of the city centre. So just to come to you, Brendan, in terms of like, what does foraging, like the relevance of foraging to you? And I'm interested in how your interest in that came about. I mean, you told us a bit about your background in growing up, but in terms of you're interested in things like foraging and related sort of processes.
So I kind of just started on my journey with foraging when we did it. I think I just started or finished my forest school training, and in that we'd learnt about, I think it was like 10 trees and 10 plants, and so I just got really interested in that, and also interested in the fact there's free food around, and I thought it was really good that we did run it in the city, because you know we all have a lens that we see the world in. You know, if I like cars, I go out and I spot different cars that I might like, whereas I actually don't like cars, so when I see cars, they're just, you know, just the colours or whatever. So, and similarly with plants, you just see a plant or a tree, you don't know what it is, but once you start learning about it, it's quite empowering, because you know what's there, you know what can be used, and there is actually a lot of accessible stuff out there. You know, and I think it is really empowering to show people what that stuff is and to give them examples of how they might be able to add that into their diet, and that can improve their health, because a lot of these plants have got nutrients in them and different vitamins and minerals that maybe not inaccessible but aren't as accessible without sort of vitamins and supplements. So that was really important to me, and also that sort of sense of connection with where you live, like knowing what's around your city. And you know, there's a park over there that I go to every spring to get wild garlic from. And you know, it's really nice to walk past trees and know what they're called, and might even give them their own name as well. But you know, you know that at the end of autumn you're going to be able to come back and get some nuts from that tree and, you know, make something from it. And I think that's really empowering for people. So yeah. And
you're very kindly as well, because I mean, like I said, that was a few years back. But we recently ran kind of like Thrive Health, Wellbeing and Empowerment Festival, and as a part of that, you, Sarah Ollier and Per Horden, you ran another foraging thing, so a few years later. And so when you think about that period of time, then, so like a few years have passed, and that was well attended by all accounts. And you know, so I'm interested in, you know, is there an interest for this? I
think it's a big thing now. So obviously, like you said, people's access to good food is kind of getting problematic. You know, a lot of good food is organic and therefore expensive. So you know, there's this interest in free food, in wild food, not just, you know, for its nutrients, but because there's an accessibility sort of thing there. And yeah, it's I think it's something that people want to be, again, more connected to nature. We you know, we've got things like climate change coming, and how that's affecting us, and how we can reduce our consumption by doing things like foraging or getting your own allotment, growing food. So these are all things that are kind of becoming more important to people, and it's also across the board. I think foraging's kind of really in the food industry. It's like, you know, top London restaurants are selling, you know, tempura beach leaves and stuff like that. So it's interesting stuff, and it's kind of in the public world at the moment. So I've actually run a couple of foraging sessions through this year with the company I set up, and they've been well attended, and people are really kind of interested, sometimes a little bit bored by how much there is out there, and kind of what it can teach them, because there's also a lot of history with foraging. So a lot of this knowledge is knowledge that we've lost, that we knew mostly pre-war, pre the wars. People would have known that, and possibly pre-industrialisation. So there's a way of connecting with history and people's roots, basically.
Word up. Respect, man. So, Karl, coming back to yourself, my friend, so obviously you've got these links between having an appreciation for the natural world growing up, something which was ingrained in you, you know, an appreciation, you were connected, and it meant something to you, and then having that contrast between moving, you know, being relocated, coming somewhere else, finding yourself surrounded by tarmac roads, concrete buildings, neon signs, billboards, the whole shebang, and you know, not necessarily a huge amount or a relevant amount or an appropriate amount, or however you want to think about it, of nature and that sort of thing. Touched upon the foraging vibes. In terms of your own personal kind of journey again, what was the kind of path or the kind of process from natural world, appreciating the abundance that exists in nature that we can forage, and then psychotropics? And how did your interest in psychotropics come about? And if you could talk a little bit, you know, if you could help us understand a little bit, like, what is a psychotropic, if anybody doesn't understand?
Psychotropic plant is any plant that sort of can have an effect, an action on your central nervous system, and can have mind-altering effects. Now, as scary as that might sound, that could be anything from your caffeine, your chocolate, as I mentioned earlier, all through to like your pieta cactus, which contains an alkaloid called mescaline, which was used for an entheogenic experience, which means basically as a spiritual journey, like a visual spiritual journey. Obviously I don't condone the use of these, but I have an understanding of how they work, how they was used, the history of them, and the possible uses in future therapies, such as the magic mushrooms being used to help make new connections in your brain, which can help people with Alzheimer's, dementia, and sort of to lift the taboo a bit from these plants in order to be able to access the best medicines, be able to research into these substances without such a stigma attached to it, and also for people in the community to not attach such a stigma onto people who may be using these, but to also promote the safe use of them as well, because you know we do have an epidemic with drugs in the cities, and that is because the knowledge we have built up over thousands of years, as like Brendan was saying, it's been lost. A lot of suppression because of people's views upon such plants, like we had the whole with people hunting the witches and the way they were deemed, but in reality these were mostly healers, but because they was in direct competition with the clergy, who had their own medicinal products like the hysops and aloe vera, they was also selling around that time. They seen these natural healers as direct competition, so in order to sort of paint them under the wrong light, to sort of come up with these witchcraft sort of, and to, as I say, to sort of take away these plants for use for people ourselves, and
So I mean, this is fascinating to me, and I think it's really crucially important that we all, you know what I mean, whoever's got a motivation and will, like try and bring awareness about the importance of these things. And I'm interested in your opinion about, so you speak about stigma, so there's a stigma that's attached to what some people would put under a catch-all like umbrella of like drugs. It's just drugs, innit? Drugs are bad. But you know, you talk about caffeine, you talk about chocolate, you know what I mean? And obviously you've got this idea of like the law, right? And people that associate like the law with, well, the state itself likes to associate law with morality, and as we all know, there's a philosophical exploration here of whether or not obeying or abiding by the law equates to being moral or ethical. And there's ways of conducting one's existence as ethically as possible, which might actually contravene with the law. So just to bring that back a minute to this idea of like stigma, right? I'm interested in your opinion, so I guess I'm kind of touching upon a little bit of my own opinion, like, you know what I mean, like certain things become criminalised, and then it's easy to associate them with being unethical, like nefarious, like immoral or destructive or whatever they might be. But you know, we understand that things aren't that simple. From your point of view, where, I mean, you touched upon the roots, some of the roots of this, or some of the history of this. If we think about the present day context, where do some of these stigmas come from? Well, like, what do you think is the main source of some of these stigmas? Because you're talking about what I'm hearing. If I knew nothing, you're telling me that these things are medicinal, they help people heal, they help people grow. Right, they're good for people in the same way that broccoli is, or cabbage is. Do you know what I mean? Or meditation is, which aren't outlawed. You know, surprisingly. But from your point of view, so what's the deal with this stigma, and like, what do you think are some of the main motivations and like causes behind it?
Well, it is quite a multifaceted problem. Obviously, you've got a lot of old traditions that we've been hanging on to for decades. For instance, with the legalisation now of cannabis, that was a very long, drawn-out process. A lot of contradictions along the way, a lot of for a lot of the people, a lot of empty promises. Like you hear in the media that, this has been said, but then a few months later, all of a sudden it's no longer decriminalised when it was, and then just so much change because there was such a panic in misinformation around the subject. No one wanted to make the right calls because, you know, the awareness of this stigma has been attached to it, so it's made things difficult for people to progress.
Yeah.
And that, again, we've put a lot of emphasis recently as a society on sort of like legalising cannabis and that. But there's a whole sort of treasure trove of other plants and fungi which...
Some of them aren't actually illegal yet, but people don't know about them as well. So.
And
Sorry, please hold that thought and carry on with it in a minute. You said yet.
Well, because obviously we've got that schedule about legal highs now, so I think maybe some of them actually do fall under that sort of illegal drugs thing. But there are lots of drugs out there or plants out there that have chemicals in them, like mushrooms, for example. There's the couple of the aminatas have a set of drugs in them that are illegal, but not illegal, but they are psychotropic, and that mushroom isn't illegal. It's not like they go out around and dig it out from places, which would probably be a bit impossible because you'd just be taking the fruit and it would grow again. But you know, these are things that they're already out there, and you're kind of outlawing the natural world, which I think is a little bit stupid.
Yeah.
And just full of all sorts of problems that might come up. So yeah, it's and talking about the stigma, I think the stigma comes from kind of like this thing of drugs and how drugs are bad, but then we have sanctioned drugs by the state, like alcohol, for example, which statistically is shown to be a lot more damaging than any of these other drugs that we have such stigma around. So.
Word up. Okay, so I asked you to hold that thought. You have to hold it for a little bit longer. We've come to the end of part 1 of this interview with Karl Smith and Brendan McDowell. Thank you very much. And we're going to have a little break, we're going to have a little reflection, and then we'll come back for part 2. Thrive together, stick about out.